Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made this Naughty Kitty card using the inside and outside sentiments new from Technique Junkies. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so here's the prototype I made, and I'm going to show you how I made it. Now, no two are ever going to be alike, but this has the inside-out sentiments, and sorry about that, I am too zoomed in for you to see that, but I'll show it to you a little bit later as I make the card. So what I have here is I have the inside-out Love is in the Air set of 10 sentiments, the SS158, and it's got both inside and outside sentiments, and I have this SD337 Retro Kitty. I have a piece of black cardstock, a piece of watercolor cardstock, and just a craft card base. And today we are going to be doing some inking, so let me go ahead and just zoom out here for you so you can see what I'm doing. And I've got here my splat box. And I've got the watercolor cardstock, and this is Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock. I've got some water, and I've got my distress sprays. And what I'm going to be doing here today is just taking the lids off and just throwing down drips, just like this. I want a real random look, but I do want my colors to go nicely. So what I've used there is Shabby Shutters. And then I'm just going to water this down. Real subtle here, and then I'm going to give it a dry. So you want to dry pretty much between layers. The watercolor paper dries pretty quickly, so and it doesn't have to be bone dry or crispy dry, but it needs to be mostly dry. And I'll use a paper towel to dab up the rest. So just running through drying it a bit more, and wherever I put my paper towel, it will lift some. So just go ahead and grab a clean paper towel and just kind of lay it flat on there and lift. And just dab off any excess water so before I move on to the next color. And for the next color, I'm going to be using pine needles, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So pretty much this is a repetitive process until I get the color combination that I really like. Pine needles is one of my favorite of the distress sprays. And these are spray stains, by the way. And here I'm adding quite a bit of water and just kind of letting that move around. And then I'll just take my heat tool to it and start drying it. I think the longest part of this is drying between layers. But it really, I love the way it comes out. That's pretty much dry. I'm not stressing out about the edges because I'll be trimming this down quite a bit. I'll trim it to 3 3/4 by 5. Or no, this one I'm trimming just a little under 4 and a little under 5 1/4. So now I'm going to go in with my peeled paint, and here we go. Same thing. I'm just taking the lid off and splattering some paint on, or stain on. And for this one, I'm going to actually get my fan brush, and I'm going to splatter on water. So I just put some water down onto my glass mat and get my brush nice and wet and just start tapping it on around the areas where the green is. And it's a little dry for me here, so what I'll end up doing is just squirting the fan brush with water so it can get it wetter. I need more wet. But I don't want a heavy squirt because I want these heavier splotches of this peeled paint green color. There we go. That makes me happy. And then just in a couple of spots, I'll put a little bit of spray where it just doesn't want to move. I need it to move a little bit. And I'll go ahead and dry up that layer. So a lot of splat dry, splat dry, splat dry. Now, to me, this is worth it. You could do, and I do this, you could do multiple backgrounds and just keep them at the handy for when you need them. And I want this to go ahead and drip around and stuff. just to get that more texture, more movement, because it will be a flat card. So I'll just go ahead and get this as dry as I think I need it. So you notice I'm not drying it to death where it's starting to curl or anything. And I've never had a problem drying something in my splat box, so just for future reference, I'll go ahead and dab off any excess wet. And I like the looks of this, but I really want it to be a darker color. So I'm going to go in here with my antique linen right over the top and just coat the whole page and then add water to just get everything moving around. And this will be our final color combination. Now you have to play with color combinations. I mean, it's going to be a complete matter of what you like. So yeah, you do you. And I'm just kind of dripping off any excess and then turning it back and forth so that I get some of those drips, because I want the drippy look here. But I don't mind that there's some white space or anything else like that. I'm happy with that. I'm going to move it outside of my splat box now, and then I'm going to go ahead and dry it completely. Now that it's dry, I'm taking my gathered twigs and I'm going to form my little heart here. So I'm just going to grab one of my little finger daubers, and I'm going to actually draw my heart on here. And it's pretty simple. I'm just making a heart shape. I don't need it to be perfect because I'm going to modify it, of course. So I'm just making a couple little circles, and then I'll make like a triangle shape and then go from there. You know, want it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm just adding more ink. And again, this is the gathered twigs. You could use any color you want, but you do want it to go kind of with the colors in your background. And then I'm just kind of shaping my heart shape, making sure that it's nice and dark. I do want this nice and dark, and it will oxidize with the water. Even though it's not an oxide, it will react. So now we're going to use some water here to get this heart moving around. And I'm just kind of going around the edges of it. And I'll kind of move the water around, but I'll also dab off where I don't think I want it to be running so bad, or add extra water just to kind of blend it out. But there's a little spot there on the right side that's a little too much for me, so I'm just going to dab it off so that I kind of keep the resemblance of a heart shape. And then, you know, I'll just move the water around while I'm drying it so that we get that expansion of that heart and those cool watermarks. So we're going to dry that completely, and then we'll move on to the next step. You see, it's almost dry, but I do want some of that running down, so I'm just kind of helping it by bouncing my paper around. And I just, you know, wanted this to be sort of an abstract heart, because our kitty, you know, is going to be, you know, sitting on top of it basically, or it's going to be sitting behind him. So that's pretty dry. I'm pretty happy with it. Now I want to take and add just a little bit more color, and I'm just going to directly dab some on. I'm not going to splatter it everywhere. And you could skip this step, but I like the extra color and dimension it brings to the card. And I'm just going to kind of move that. And that was Rusty Hinge, by the way, that I sprayed on there. Again, you could skip this step if you wanted to. And then I'll just dab and try and move that one spot around. If it doesn't want to move, it's there. You get what you get, right? We don't mind. This is abstract. We're just adding that added extra dimension and color. And I'll go ahead and dry these up here with my heat tool. And this is why you want to use a good quality watercolor paper. And I am working, by the way, on the smooth side because I still want to stamp on here. I really enjoy working with these sprays. They're about my favorite. And then I'm just going to dab off the excess water. And there I'm happy with my background. Just kind of wipe off my table there. And I've got my heart and everything. So now I'm ready to move on to the next step, which is to trim this down. And I'm trimming it down to a little under 4 by a little under 5 1/4, because I'm going to mat it with a 4 and a 5 1/4 piece of black cardstock. But the mat is going to be very, very, very thin. So I'm just trying to get these sides and everything so it's sort of even looking, and so that I can have my spatial, orientation right on the card. So next we're going to grab our retro kitty. I just love this little kitty. It reminds me of the old retro clocks. Would love to have one of those where the cat's eyes move back and forth. That'd be so much fun. So I'm going to grab my stamp platform here, and I'm going to be stamping on Distress Heavy Stock in white, because I want it to be a fairly heavy piece, and I'm going to be heat embossing. So the heavier the paper, the better. So I don't get a lot of warping, because I do want to glue it down. I'm going to set my kitty off to the side here, because I'm going to be fussy cutting. And I'm going to use some VersaFine Clair in black, because I can emboss over it. And I'll probably stamp him 3 times. Him or her. It. I don't know. I'll stamp Kitty 3 times. Just putting some nice pressure on it. Sorry, I just went through a whole sneezing fit, so I still got the sniffles from it. Winter, don't you know? But I do want this to be nice and black. So there's a second, and it's good, but I'm going to lay some more ink on here so that I can just lay that down and it'll stay wet while I grab my clear embossing powder and heat up my embossing tool. And, yeah, there we go. Let me pull this out, and I keep it in a little sort of drawer thing. And I didn't do any anti-static powder or anything because I'm going to be cutting this out, so it's not a big deal. I'll just go ahead and coat Kitty. And part of the reason I'm doing this is so I don't smudge it, because I will smudge it. And then we'll go ahead and heat emboss it. And since I warmed up my heat tool, it shouldn't take long at all. Lord, I need a black heat tool so you don't see all that finger dirt on it. I just bought a black die cutting machine just because I just get ink everywhere, and so I just prefer all my things to be black. I still would clean it off, but maybe, at least you're not going to see it. So I set Kitty aside to dry, and now I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment. And I'm going to just stamp the sentiment straight down flat. I'm not going to do any embossing or anything on it, but I am going to use my stamp platform. And this is my Misty tool, by the way. And I'm also going to use a piece of acetate. I don't know if this is acetate or what it is, but it's clear plastic, so it doesn't matter. But that's mainly so I can get the placement correct for my stamp. And so I'll lay it down where I think it's correct, and then pull it up in my stamp tool. And I'm looking at it, and I'm just going to tap it once with my stuff and see if I like the placement. And yep, I'm happy with the placement, so I'll go ahead and move my little piece of plastic here so I can stamp directly onto the card base. But I will, in case I have to stamp more than once, I will magnet this guy down, though he is pushed down all the way into the corner. And I'll go ahead and just push that down. Not too heavy, but I will do 2 coats. The sentiment stamps stamp out really well. And there we go. I've got my stamp on here, and I'm going to set that aside and let it dry a little bit. And then off camera, I'm going to cut out Kitty. I think I'm going to cut him off camera. I hope so. First, I'm going to trim off some of the white so that I can save that for another project. So I'll trim it off pretty close. Because, your paper, especially heavy stock, is precious, and so I use it for a lot of things. So let me go ahead and get this cut out. All right, I've got him cut out here, and I'm kind of just looking at placement on my card, but I am going to take a black pen, and this is just a Tombow water pen that I'm using with the brush end. And I'm just going to go around the edges of Kitty to cover up any white. All right, we've got Kitty done. Now we're ready to start our assembly here. So Kitty's going to sit right about there, but I don't want him sitting in just flat plain air. So I'm going to give him a place to sit with this washi tape. I love this black and white polka dotted washi tape. It's great. I don't even know where I got it. I may have got it at Joann's. I don't know. So I'm going to kind of set him where I want him. And I'm going to set the washi tape just lightly on it. And I think that's about where I want it. And then just lift it out and push down the washi tape. You can glue that down too if you want to. I'm not going to, because Kitty's going to get glued on top of it. And if it lifts, it lifts. It's, you know, it's vintage. So go ahead and glue Kitty down here. I'm getting plenty of glue on him. And you could cut this easily with your Scan and Cut if you have one. I prefer to just whoop out my scissors. I'm just kind of placing Kitty where I think Kitty should be. Pretty simply. Making sure all the parts are good and stuck down. And that's that. Easy peasy. The hard part is getting my pin back in my glue. You ever have that problem? Yeah, me too. And now what I want to do is I want to ink this around the edges. And I'm going to be using Vintage Photo Distress ink. And I like to use this flat foam brush to do this. It just makes it softer because I do want it soft. So I'm just lightly going around the edges, and then I'll go around again a little more heavy just along the very edge, just to cover up any white from the paper, just like this. Just kind of swiping it on. And that, I feel like that Vintage Photo on the edges just pulls it all together. Okay, all done with that part. Now all we have to do is put this thing together. So let's grab my card base and grab my black cardstock, and this is all going to be flat. So I'm going to glue this down to the matte layer, and you see it's a very, very, very thin border. I don't want a thick border. Now on my original, on my prototype, I sewed it down, but I sewed it down with some like jeans colored thread, the kind that you would put together like Levi's. But I only have black thread in my machine right now, so I'm not going to sew it down. I'm just going to glue it. Sewing it adds a little extra, you know, zhuzhes it up a bit, but it's not necessary. But if you can invest in a sewing machine, it just really adds that extra touch. And I'm going to go ahead and lay this down and make sure that it dries and go ahead and stamp the inside. So I need to find that, even though I sometimes think about suffocating you in your sleep, and they're pretty easy to find because they all have different fonts. I love this font. I think it's beautiful. So I'm going to kind of move this up out of my way so I can get my stamp platform in here. And again, I'm just using my Misty tool. And I'm going to lay my card down. And it's okay if it hangs over the edge. No big deal at all. And I do want to grab my piece of acetate so I can get my placement proper in here. And it looks like I'm going to be hugely off camera here because I've got that other piece in my way. But I'm going to lay the stamp down in the platform and get it where I kind of think it should be. And then I'll just lightly tap it and stamp it down. And if I like the placement, I'll go ahead and stamp it down, move the plastic and stamp it down. And I always wipe off my plastic first. And I'm so sorry you can't see this. It's my bad for having that other piece in my way. There you can see just a little bit of it. And it's stamped down perfectly, so I'll show you here in a second. Just get my stamp platform out of the way. And there we have our inside sentiment. And what I like to do, because I did stamp it with a pigment ink, is before I close up the card to put it together, I'll put a piece of paper in between there to blot any excess off and to keep it from transferring onto the top part of the card. And then all I'm going to do is just glue this down to the craft card base, and we'll be done with this card. You could add embellishments if you wanted to. I have a lot of them, but I'm not super big on them on a grungy type card. So I'm standing up as I do this. I'm just going to kind of wiggle it around till it goes to where it needs to go, and then I'll give it a good press. And there we have our naughty kitty all glued together and ready to go in the mail. And it'll mail normally because it's a relatively flat card. So, yeah. There's our kitty cat. I hope you like this video. If you do, give me a thumbs up and leave a comment in the comment section below. Thanks so much for watching, and if you want to save some money, use my code TJ10Color at techniquejunkies.com. Take care. Bye-bye.